Now, properly, number 2 on the agenda, State Police Promotional Exam, appearances by Dr. Helen Wise and Mr. Ronnie Jones, also I believe Dr. Jones, but so
Far from it.
so thank y'all for being here today. I'll give you the floor.
Would you like to?
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ronnie Jones. I'm a retired lieutenant colonel. I've got about 33 years of service in state police. And before I left the first time, I was liaison to this commission. I was on state police when the commission was created, and came back in '08. And the first project I was assigned was to develop a new testing series from our promotional exams. We've been buying exams from a group out of California. We wanted to tailor the exams to this agency and this state. And during my time I was with state police, I worked with 2 different consultants. We now have Dr. Helen Wise, who will introduce herself shortly. And I'm no longer in state police. I'm the chairman of the Gaming Control Board. I have a full-time job there, but I'm sort of the institutional advisor to Helen on testing issues. Since I have no dog in the hunt, I'm not subject to testing. I don't have to take any of the exams. I help her put the SME groups together. Welcome, Chief. Glad you're here. So that's the role that I've served. And I'm just here today to sort of answer any questions with respect to testing that Helen can address. But she's a whole lot smarter than me, so she's going to handle most of the questions.
No, thank you. I'm glad to be here today. Dr. Helen Wise from Louisiana State University in Shreveport. I'm part of the Institute for Nonprofit Administration and Research. Starting my 17th year. My background, my PhD is in applied sociology, so it really is about methodology and assessment. And also in the audience today is
Excuse me, Dr. Wise, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I don't think they can hear
Right.
you
Oh, I'm sorry.
in the bag.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Do you want me to put my teacher voice on?
There you go.
Okay. So I'm looking at you guys. So I'm Dr. Helen Wise. I've been at Louisiana State University in Shreveport now. This is ending my 17th year. My PhD is in applied sociology, which means that the emphasis is on assessment and program evaluation, how things function. I'd also like to call attention that my colleague, Dr. Deanne Arnold, who serves as a consultant with me on this project, is here as well, and may be able to answer some questions along the lines. So in 2009, we were contacted by the State Police Commission, and in particular, I believe Mark Oxley was the commission chairman at the time, to discuss some ways or what our thoughts might be about how to move forward with new promotional testing. At the time, there was some concern over the test that was being administered, that a great number of test questions were having to be thrown out. And as you know, if 40% of the people taking the test are missing the questions, it doesn't point to a lot of integrity within that particular assessment. Things were very obscure, things weren't relevant to the work that the people were doing. And so we were brought in and began a process of developing a new promotional exam that was first implemented in 2010. So today, some of the things that I wanted to go over with you were the background of this current promotional testing. How did we get to where we are? What were the steps that we've gone through over the past 6 years to arrive at this? Also, I did want to revisit the recommendations that I was asked to present to the board in December. I know there was some confusion over what it meant, and I want to be able to explain what I meant, and also to reiterate, these are simply recommendations moving forward. And then the third thing would be just to talk about some of the updates on our upcoming promotional exam. We are closing in on promotional testing. It is coming up very soon, and so I want to talk to you a little bit about that.
One quick thing that I neglected. Out of everything that you do as a commission, this is one of the most important things. The decisions that you make with respect to testing literally affect the careers of the troopers who are in the classified service. If you can't pass the exam, if you can't get on a list, if you can't achieve a certain score, you can't get promoted. That's the system, and that's a good system. You will get more calls and complaints about testing than anything else, because as many people who do well on a test, there are some who just don't test well. It's an imperfect system, but we're in a lot better shape today than we were in '08. 2010, and it improves every year. So all I would ask is that as you work through the issues of testing after hearing Helen and your deliberations in subsequent meetings, just be cautious and deliberative about how you change this process. A lot of work has gone into it. I have a lot of faith in what she does and what Deanne does, what LSUS does for us. Just be careful about making drastic changes without considering the consequences and collateral issues that evolve out of that. That's all I want to ask. Go ahead, Alan. I'm sorry.
Thank you. The very first thing that we had to address is that in order to come up with a test, you have to understand what the people who work in Louisiana State Police do every day. And the very first thing that we learned is that the job descriptions had not been updated in 10 years when we started. Well, I think as everyone here knows, jobs change dramatically, and we are in a rapidly evolving, especially in terms of technology, workplace. The knowledge, skills, and abilities that people were being hired into in the early 90s are extraordinarily different than what we're hiring in today. Even over the time that we've been doing this, there have been new systems that have been implemented. And so what was happening is a lot of the testing was taking place off of those old job descriptions. And so the very first thing that we did is we undertook a 6-month-long job task analysis. And when I tell you there was somewhere between 30 and 40, I believe, it's been a long time, since 2010, there were somewhere between 30 and 40 state police who were literally asked to go in and talk about what are the things that you do every day. And so the first thing that we did is we had the SMEs, or the subject matter experts, who had agreed, and they were at every level within state police. We had them go in and they formulated what are called task statements. So, for example, a task statement might look like something, I fill out a timesheet, or I fill out a leave request, or I'm responsible for filing paperwork related to accidents that I've written up. There were a lot of those. I want to say that we had somewhere around 2,000 tasks that were generated every day by people who work in the state police. And that was it was a tremendous amount of information to go through, but it was able to give us insight into the work that actually occurs, not the work that we want to occur. And so from those SME task statements, we were able to eliminate and combine a lot of those. Once we were able to eliminate and combine those, we were able to sort those into clusters, and I'll go over those with you in just a little bit.
How often are the job task analysis performed?
The last one that we did was in 2010.
Are they usually performed on a certain revolving basis, or just as needed, or how does that usually work?
1 second. Deanne, how would you answer that question?
Deanne, come up.
Yes.
I'll get out of the way.
Oh, thank you. Because I think it's been on the institution as
Okay.
well. So.
Job task analysis would be updated anytime there was a material change to the job implementation. For example, a great one in this scenario is when laptops were introduced into the actual units. That would be a good time to reanalyze. As a job stays pretty stable, it'd be a waste of resources to do it more often.
Okay. So is this something that's triggered by the agency? They alert you as to a new...
It would be.
Okay.
It would be. So for example, if I'm not mistaken, EIS is a new system that's been implemented, and we're going through a process right now where everyone's being trained on it in the phase 2 leadership. So even though it's been in use, they're just now being trained on it. So once they've been trained on it, that information has been disseminated. It may be a time, but it wouldn't necessarily mean that we would have to go back and do every single level. And that's part of it. I mean, none of these descriptors have been changed in 10 years.
Right.
And so it really was a time when a lot of technology was evolving and things were really changing from a lot of inconsistencies. You want to go ahead?
No.
Okay.
Please introduce yourself.
I'm so sorry, Deanne.
I'm Deanne Arnold. I am a consultant. I work with the Institute. I have a background in human resources. I actually was the director of human resources for LSU Shreveport for several years. I worked with human on many issues. I have my PhD in industrial organization psychology from Louisiana Tech with a focus on job analysis and testing.
Thank you. And so once that happened, we were able to go back to the SMEs and have them rate and generate what we call the KSAs. What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that need to go with each of the tasks? So imagine that we had, it was about 1900 if I'm going to be specific, job tasks. Then we were able to, had to go back and ask them, so what is the knowledge that you have? What are the skills that you have? What are the abilities that you have to be able to perform those? And then link those to what we're going to talk about with the work behavior categories in just a second. After we were able to do that, we had them go in and review it. So it was a very extensive process that involved a tremendous amount of manpower hours from the actual state police, the people who work in the state police, a lot of revisions, and then every time we took a step, one of the things that we did is we engaged those SMEs. And sometimes we would re-engage the same SMEs, and sometimes we would re-engage separate, just as an external check to the validity of the work that we were doing. Okay, so one of the things that came out of this is there were 9 general work behaviors that were identified: supervision of subordinates, administrative duties, communication internal and external, advanced supervision, policy and procedures, and then strategic planning and budget. And I have a list of each of those if anyone wants to look at it. But this becomes the content of what then we want to test on. Because what state police are telling us is this is the actual work that is being performed at each of the promotional levels. And so these are the things that we want to work on. The other thing that came out of this, I'm gonna let Deanne answer this because she put this together. Sort of the overview, and if you have it with you, you'll see there's a sliding scale in terms of the results of the job task analysis, and it was one of the major findings that really came out of this.
Well, one of the main things we found is that the state police has a very strong culture. It's very driven by order and rules and policies and procedures, and we found a very cohesive amount of work being done. What's being done in North Louisiana is very similar to South Louisiana. We did find a lot of cohesiveness. And what we found is that as troopers rise through the ranks, they spend less time policing and more time supervising. So less time on the operational features and more time supervising others who do it. So we found that to be a major skill set as they promote. They need to be able to kind of teach a man how to fish rather than go out and fish for them, right? We found that to be true. The other thing we found is that as they move through the ranks, they have to start supervising larger and larger groups, which takes a different skill set. So we found that a captain needs to know how to supervise a supervisor, right? We also found that the big change through the years is that they're interfacing more with the public and required to respond more to public complaints, inquiries from the news. That seemed to be a skill that we needed to bring through the ranks. And we found a major need for better writing skills, to be able to write memos, to write letters. And we also found that the shift that we wanted to see take place in the culture of the state police was more of an empathetic level of servant leadership. So what I mean by that is, if someone comes to work late every single day, we don't just write them up for being late. We sit down with them and say, hey, what's going on in your life? What's going on here? Why were you a star employee last year and now you're struggling? So those were the trends that we saw coming through the task analysis overall, and the things we wanted to reinforce through the testing process.
Yes, and understand that this coincided with an internal push by Louisiana State Police to implement leadership testing. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with this, but there was an overall push within state police to formalize their own internal leadership testing. And so over the past few years, state police have been required to attend what they call relational leadership testing. And that is what we are going to refer to as phase 1. But in response to some of the job task analysis, they've also implemented phase 2, which is specific to sergeants, specific to lieutenants, and then specific to captains. Because of that increased emphasis, that's going to tie back into some of the recommendations that we've made. The other thing, the biggest change, and probably the hardest hurdle that we had to overcome, was the introduction of a writing component. And as you may know, a lot of standardized testings, or a great many standardized tests, have moved to a writing component. Even in Louisiana right now, our students are getting ready to take the LEAP test, And there is going to be a writing component on there. As Dan said, when we started looking at the job task analysis, the writing skills of some of the individuals was very important. And so it was at that point that we started to develop a rubric for how we were going to score the writing, because there's a lot of ambiguity, especially for the test taker. How am I going to be scored? If I know I have to produce a writing sample, I'm going to want to know how that's going to come about. And so we were very fortunate that Ronnie was able to help us craft those scenarios, the writing scenarios. We craft 9 scenarios every year at each level, and as Dan said, so there's going to be an operational level focus when we get to sergeant. When it comes to lieutenant, you're really bridging that gap between learning about how to supervise and still supervising the people that are underneath you. And then as you start to move forward into captain, that is an area that we tend to emphasize things more like how do you engage with external entities on behalf of state police, but also things related to strategic planning. Because a lot of times we find that captains and above are spending a lot of time engaged in that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this except to say that Deanna and I do not create the scoring rubrics that are used for each of the individual scenarios. All 9 scenarios are brought to a team of subject matter experts, and we spend a full day with these subject matter experts. And so, for example, one of the areas that we score on is content. The subject matter experts give us the content to look for. Another area that was deemed important by the subject matter areas was not just content, but what is the tone? And as Deanne just said, there was a distinct shift within state police to move towards more of that servant leadership. And so in some cases, we have to look to the SMEs to determine, so what sort of tone should we have? We have moved away from scoring based on things like technicality because, I mean, let's face it, we all have a Word document, we all have spell check, and we all have those kinds of things. So it really became more about the formatting of it. Was it in a proper format? Was it directed to the correct people? What was the content that was necessary? And then the tone and overall organization. Then we also use independent scorers. And one of the ways that we ensure, this was the biggest question that we had that first year, bringing it back to the troopers, is how do I know my score is a fair score? So not to get too technical, but there's a thing called inter-rater reliability. And imagine there are 4 categories for each question that we rank, and then we get an overall score.
Would you mind if I just ask
Of
one question
course.
while you went over it? And
Sure.
This is for operational understanding.
Yes.
For the writing portion,
Yes.
are those graded anonymously? Is there a way to protect the anonymity of who wrote it so that they're not biased by reading who wrote it? Or is it?
Yeah.
They're graded by us, we don't.
So you don't know who wrote it? You just grade it and it's.
We have like the PO number attached to each essay that we get, but we don't personally know the people. Unless they've been an SME in the past, but we choose SMEs who are not eligible for promotional testing.
Right.
So
There is identifying information, but just like if you were test taker number 22752, I wouldn't know that was TJ Doss.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I just wanted to understand if there was a gap so that there wouldn't be individual bias. So-
and when she and I are the graders. We are the 2 that grade every essay.
Yes, ma'am.
And we just aren't as familiar with, I mean, I guess if it was someone in my neighborhood that was on state police,
Right.
that'd be about the only way I would
Sure.
have, but I wouldn't have their name anyway assigned to the essay.
Okay, so there's no names assigned, it's just a number.
And
Okay.
then put them in a spreadsheet.
Forgive me for interrupting.
No, I mean, that is a great question, and I think it sort of speaks to it. But one of the things that we do to ensure reliability, because everybody wants to know, we get a lot of requests to have scores regraded, right? I want to have it looked at again. I talked to my friend after the test. We put the same information in there, and without putting that back, we can rescore it. But if you get the same score every single time, at some point you have to accept that score is probably a reliable score. Can we all agree on that? Yeah. And so one of the things that we do is at the end, we grade these independently. We then sit down and run something that says how reliable are the scores. If you scored someone a 6, did I score them a 25? And so any score that is more than 3 points difference, I have 25 points, we go through and regrade together and revisit that in order to close the gap. The thing I can tell you is at the end we always run something called an inter-rater reliability test to see how well we're doing. So independently of one another, how close are our scores? And I believe the first year that we did this and every subsequent year, we've been at 90% or better. So the rubrics work if you use them, and it's very helpful to us to have the SMEs explain to us exactly what they are looking for within this written component. Okay, so any questions as far about sort of where we are? At the time, the way that it was explained to us, there were 3 basic questions. Are the results consistent? I'm going to skip ahead to reliability. If someone is scoring an 81 year, a 40 the next year, and 100 the next year, that is not a reliable measure of what they are doing. So imagine that you have all A's in high school in every single subject, and then you go to take the ACT and you make a 12. I mean, which one is the more accurate view? We want all of our indicators to be aligning. So over time and then within the test, is there consistency within the score? And then validity. Are we measuring what we intend to measure? The problem with any sort of an objective test is smart people do better. And I know what you're going to say. Well, we want really smart people. Some people just aren't really good test takers, right? And that was part of the problem is in order, and also forced choice tests tend to favor males more than females. By introducing the writing component, females tend to do better on written components. They tend to be more expressive, whereas men tend to do a little bit better on sort of the forced choice. So we're really guarding against some of that gender bias that may have been present in some of the standardized testing before. And then differentiating. I cannot emphasize this enough, how important it was that we created a test. Everyone wants to make a 90 or above. I mean, everybody wants to make a 90 or above. That's a terrible test unless, I mean, at the cadet level, we'd be happy for that. This test has to discriminate against test takers. You have to be able to say this person was 2 points better than their next closest competitor. You have to be able to say the highest score was a 98, but the lowest score was a 48, and that there is merit in those scores. So differentiating between test takers and then ultimately differentiating between ranks. One of the things that we hope to see is if we're giving a test, a sergeant probably shouldn't be scoring as high as a lieutenant. A lieutenant shouldn't be scoring as high as a captain, okay? So let's talk about some of the results that we've seen over the past 6 years. Yes, sir. No, of course.
My ignorance here, is it the same test given to sergeants?
No, there is a core group of questions that is embedded in, there's 20 questions out of 100 that are embedded into every test. And what that is designed to do is it's designed to give us an internal check. Those 20 questions are appropriate and they're consistent across rank, but it allows us to see how do sergeants score on this, how do lieutenants score, and then we can differentiate between individual test takers. Because those same 20 are on there, let's say that we all of a sudden saw sergeants scoring much, much higher. That would have triggered an automatic problem with us. But the rest of them, when we originally generated the questions with the SMEs, they were by rank. And so captains are going to have different questions on their test than sergeants and then lieutenants. That makes sense? Okay. Okay, so let's talk about some of the results that we've seen. One of the most important findings, and we've looked back over the past 3 years, one of the questions that we want to be able to answer is not just who passed this test, but who gets promoted, because that's important, right? I mean, when you think about someone passing the test, you also want to know, well, did they subsequently get promoted? And so when we looked at individuals who've been promoted over the past 3 testing cycles, And we looked at captain in particular. And the reason that we looked at captain in particular is when you think about it, there's a much smaller window of scores because in order to be a captain, you had to pass the lieutenant's test, right? At sergeant, everybody can test. Lieutenant, we get a smaller pool, and captain, we get a smaller pool. And so when we looked at the individuals who were promoted to the level of captain, those who get promoted are consistently the ones who have the highest score on the written component and on the leadership component. It does not matter what they do on other sections. They will usually pull out a very good score. And I can only give you an example. One individual who was promoted had the single highest score in leadership and the single highest written score for captain in the first position that came open. That individual was promoted. The reason that is important is one of the things that we wanted to do was to differentiate. So within the test, what are the sections that actually differentiate for us? And the answer is, especially at the higher levels, the sections that differentiate for us in terms of promotion are leadership and the written component.
Are the components reported separately, or is it
Yes,
a
the
composite
components
score?
are all reported separately because one of the things that we want to do is we want to look at, so for example, DA is a section that is on there. And understand that these are sections that are holdovers from the previous tests. Because one of the things that we didn't want to do is come in and say, okay, everybody who tests, you're going to have a completely new test. There's going to be nothing similar, no study materials that are going to be consistent. And so we've held over a lot of this material. But we report, so for example, for sergeant, we report their score on DA, their score on criminal code, and we report those separately so that we can then go back and look at and say, okay, so where's the strongest correlation? So is it people who are scoring really well on policy and procedure, or are they just knocking it out of the park when it comes time to be promoted to lieutenant? But for captain, and especially for captain, leadership and written. But we also find leadership and written is important at sergeant level. Leadership and written is important at the other. And it may very well reflect what Deanne was talking about. I mean, it's been 5 years now that Louisiana State Police has been really emphasizing this change in culture. And so it's starting to show up in the testing process and in the promotability of the individual.
Might the promoting, trying to validate the
I
test
understand.
based on promoting, might that also just be validating a bias on those who make the decisions on promotion?
If they were the ones constructing the test, I might say yes.
Well, but you're validating the test based on their decisions on promotion.
But that is simply one of them. We can also look at them and say, those are the people who score the highest on the tests as well. So those are the people who
And that's-
are, right.
But to be promoted, it's a multiple hurdle system.
Yes.
We're not promoting based on test alone. They're going to have interviews, they review their records. So it's kind of, the best way I always like to look at, does it walk like a duck, talk like a duck, look like a duck? Then it's probably a duck, right? So if they can take a test and do well as a captain, they've got performance evaluations in their career that show leadership ability. They can interview and do a face-to-face question. You add all those things together, then they get promoted. So we're only one of the hurdles for promotion. So for ours to line up with that, it means that they're able to pass the other hurdles as well and be successful.
But the other hurdles don't have an objective
We would hope
component to them.
we would hope they do. I can't.
What you're assuming, I guess my point is, there's an assumption involved in validating the test in part based
Sure.
on
Sure.
its consistency with promotion. That's the
And
whole point.
that was one indicator that we looked at, okay? The other thing was that we saw that scores for individuals did rise in subsequent years, but they didn't rise significantly. So there is a test, retest. People who test the first year tend to come back and test the second year, tend to do a little bit better. But what we don't tend to see are 20 and 30 point jumps. The range of scores is greater the lower the rank, and I think we talked about that. So for sergeant, you're going to have a significant amount of people who don't do as well and that are at the bottom. And then you're going to have a few people who do really well. So the basement and the ceiling, there's a much greater distance. Once we get to sergeant, that number tends to narrow. Once we get to captain, it narrows even more. We also tend to look at the median score Through all ranks, we look at it for the core questions, and then we looked at it for the overall scores. And so it's rising within. And then over the past 4 years, we haven't necessarily seen a significant change in the median score. That may or may not have to do with the testers. It may or may not have to do with the content that's on there. It may also do that some people choose to opt out and hold their scores over. Okay.
I'm sorry, I read that back again. What you just explained about how the median scores have been consistent, but
They've been fairly consistent. You don't necessarily have a lot of diversity in the people. So for example, people who test for captain, you're not going to have a significant difference in the number of people, A, who are testing, or B, in terms of, like, the lowest score might be a 70 and it's an 80. Somebody comes in the next time, it's a 68 and you know, it's a 92. Because of the people who are testing, we're not seeing a significant difference in terms of that median score over time. But we can't say, is it because people are maxing out, holding their score over? Is it the test takers? But the test has been consistent. Is that a fair way to characterize that? Okay. So back in December, I sent you 3 recommendations that I was asked to provide the commission, and I want to express it in this way. If we were to make changes moving forward, how could we better refine the target? And so what we've looked at, the testing, is we started out here and we had a really good idea, but every year we're trying to narrow it just a little bit better. And so the recommendations were either a graduated reduction or elimination of some of the questions in the district attorney's handbooks, the Louisiana Criminal Code, and the State Police Policy and Procedure. I would like to clarify, I do not mean to eliminate all 3 of these sections. But it does speak back to the fact that leadership and written tend to be better predictors for us. Now, whether that's important for you or not, but they do tend to be a little bit better predictors. They also align with what state police has stated is important for them through their job task. What we've seen is the most challenges and the most complaints come from these 3 areas, and part of the reason for that is, so if you have someone who works in gaming, okay, and that person hasn't ridden in a troop car or written a ticket in years, and probably will never ride in a troop car and write a ticket again, that's the content that we're testing this individual on. We don't have specific to each of the classifications. It is a general thing. Our argument would have been that at some point they did pass tests to be able to, and again, you have some other checks. Doesn't mean that we can't include those. It's just in terms of the weighting right now, more of the weight falls to DA, criminal code, and policy and procedure than others. We would recommend increasing leadership.
The question I would have for you is, I somewhat understand the DA handbook, I somewhat understand the criminal code, the policies and procedures. If they're going to be leading these other individuals, they need to know the policies and procedures better than anybody else. And if we de-emphasize the value of that aspect of the test, we're going to be de-emphasizing the value of people that know those things in promotions.
Okay, and I would argue the way that a forced choice test is constructed, right? Bloom's taxonomy. The first thing that we have to do is we have to know something. We have to regurgitate information. So a true-false question. When you come to a 4-way stop, the person to the left is the first person who goes, right? That's it, and that is, I have no idea. True or false, I'm not a state police officer. But on a test, right, that is a potential question. What we want to do is move these up into higher order thinking, into what if you were a lieutenant and you had a sergeant who wrote a ticket related to this idea? What would be your best option? What is the first thing that you should do? What is the second thing that you should do? What is the third thing, the fourth thing?
So are you essentially saying that you're going to propose hypotheses where they have to issue spot and then pick out all of the things that are based on call-outs from the handbook that code, policy, and procedure, and they would actually have to be identifying those as opposed
We
to.
want to include them as situational judgment questions or something that maybe from, I think we talked about this before, sort of an in-basket task or an in-basket assessment. So moving.
Just to interrupt you again, I'm sorry, but
Okay.
yeah, if that's what you're talking about, that's a different emphasis than saying we're de-emphasizing policy and procedure. You're just testing it in a different way, and that's fine. I
And
don't have a problem.
but we may test it in a situational judgment way versus this, and I hate to use this term, but that regurgitation of information.
Well-
That's all we meant.
And nobody wants just regurgitation, but obviously we would not want a test that de-emphasizes the knowledge that might be applied in a different and tested in a different way.
Sure.
And so when you say de-emphasize policy and procedure, the impression we get is that it's going to de-emphasize
No.
the knowledge that is necessary to answer the questions.
No, and in fact, with some of the written questions, that's the beauty of the written scenario, is that we are able to take those 9 work category behaviors, we're able to pull those work category behaviors out, link them over to policy and procedure. I mean, that's what we're looking for.
Okay, that's
Does that make
fine.
sense?
Just say it that way next time. It gets our dander up when
Okay,
you start saying
okay.
we're de-emphasizing policies and
That-
procedures.
and that was what we were saying, to emphasize more of that situational judgment kind of an assessment, okay? All right, so any questions about those? Which would, in fact though, because we've now gone through leadership phase 2, we're gonna be incorporating those questions. So now we have leadership phase 1 and leadership phase 2. Those points have to come out of somewhere, or else we have to increase the total value of the point. Right now we have it weighted. So if we're going to increase the amount of information that are coming out of leadership, part of the other thing that we looked at is instead of 25 points on criminal code, maybe we'll have 20 points on criminal code and move those 5 points over to leadership. But that is a question for a later time, okay? So I gave you some information related to 1 and 3. I know that this had been a question the commission had, what do other states do? And I won't spend a lot of time on this because the hyperlinks are in the original. You can actually go and look at it. We pulled some states that are pretty open and transparent about it. I hope you would know not all states are very transparent. They don't all post bulletins. They don't all test every year. Some of them still use the California test. Some of them construct their own tests. So there's great diversity. And just so that you could get an idea, I think there's 1,500 state troopers in Louisiana, somewhere about that. So we looked at 2 states, one that was 1,100, one that was 1,800. We looked at Arkansas, we looked at Mississippi. Everyone includes written components. Some of them include more than one written component. And there's also the emphasis, sort of the recommendations that we talked about for the in-basket assessment or the oral assessment.
So is there an industry standard or a national standard that sets one up? So each state has the.
Absolutely, and they do, and they take it very seriously. Texas underwent a statewide review of their testing procedure after allegations of corruption, for a better word, bias in their testing and things like that. And so I believe that was in 2015. And so they formed a task force, a commission that looked at every aspect, and they're in the process of reevaluating the way that they do it. You also have to look at it, each state, some states are incredibly rural, some states are primarily urban, you have more power in a local law enforcement than you do a state law enforcement. So this was just to give you an idea of some of the other ways that states are doing this, and 3 options that really emerged, things that we're not doing, we don't have to do, but just I thought you might want to understand sort of the best practices. Oral exams, much like the cadets go through their final stage, the oral exams, that is a very cost prohibitive and difficult process to do in a timely manner. Just want you to know that. What we call in-basket exercises. So imagine that someone walked into your office and, I've got a problem, I need you to handle it. Largely, that's what our written tests, written components of our tests are right now. We wouldn't mind seeing that expanded to some other questions. sort of like I've discussed with you before. And then lastly, assessment centers. Assessment centers are incredibly expensive to do as well. And that is where you would actually perform tasks in front of the SMEs who would score you independently. So just in addition to written components, these are 3 other ways that organizations sort of deal with that same issue. And then lastly, we have our promotional exams coming up. We are scheduled for May 16th. We have morning and afternoon sessions in Shreveport, Alexandria, and Baton Rouge. All of the tests will be administered electronically. We have a makeup exam scheduled for May 22nd for a morning session only in Baton Rouge, and we will be including Phase 2 leadership questions. Phase 2 leadership actually wraps up next week, so for captains, we are under a time crunch, but we will be including Phase 2 leadership questions, and then we are prepared to come and meet with the commission in July to discuss the reports. However, the tests, I'm going to defer to Christy. I want to say we usually get the letters out somewhere around the 2nd week of June. First and 2nd week of June. Okay? So any questions for us? Yes.
I'm only speaking for myself, I'm not speaking for the rest, but I guess what I would like to see is, and I do have a better understanding of what you were saying a little bit earlier, but I just want assurances that as we move towards these situational questions, that there are going to be situational questions that will require in-depth knowledge of the policies and procedures in order for them to address them and maybe address it in a different way, but that without the knowledge, they won't be able to pass the situational test, the situational question either, because they won't know the policy.
Well, and Mr. Simeon, let me assure you, one of the things that we do, and as Deanna emphasized, I mean, this really is our background, but we are not subject matter experts, and one of the things that has been so beneficial is that we have created a working relationship with Louisiana State Police for them to provide us with SMEs who are incredibly knowledgeable and can tell you, this policy and procedure is no longer important. And so we do rely on the SMEs to guarantee that for us.
I guess I'm just concerned when you say that they provide you which ones aren't important. They're all important to be followed, but
I don't mean that at all, but they can certainly emphasize to us what is used on a daily basis, what is used consistently, and what is fair. One of the things that we don't want to be accused of, even though it's perfectly within our right, is to pick the most obscure rule that's on the book to do a gotcha question. Right?
Nobody wants that, but
No.
and that's not my point either.
Okay.
And our focus is really transitioning from just basic knowledge to application, and they have to have the basic knowledge to apply. So we are capturing that knowledge, but we're just trying to kind of get more into the gray area than the, do you know how to pick on a multiple choice which policies better.
And that's the only assurance I want, and you
Absolutely.
just said it.
Okay. Perfect.